Welcome to the Miscellaneous Film Festival podcast. This is an excerpt from our mini film fest, Movies Close to My Heart, presented by friend of the show, Dustin Bartolucci. To hear the full episode, click on the link in the description. And now, on with the show. No, we're talking about Network from 1976, which was directed by Sidney Lumet, starring Faye Dunaway and Peter Finch. I thought a good summary for this was, amongst shakeups in a major news network, veteran anchorman Howard Beale announces to viewers that he will kill himself during his farewell broadcast, which sort of perpetuates a spiral of events in the network. And I would say cynicism is a huge color in the palette of this movie. About
I actually don't think the movie's that cynical.
You don't?
No. Like it's definitely pissed off. But Patty Chayefsky actually has solutions for the people in the audience. They just don't like it. So I guess it's important to note that Patty Chayefsky, the writer, he actually had final cut on this. So he was very hand in hand with Sidney Lumet on this. And it may be Lumet. I might be just wrong for the last 10 years. But because I've never heard his name pronounced. So let's use both and see what happens.
Lumet.
Yeah, Patty Chayefsky, like prolific writer in Hollywood at the time, or had been. Like he wrote a ton in the 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. This was one of the last things he did. The last movie he ever did was Altered States, the William Hurt movie. He was definitely upset. Most of the writing he had done in his career was television writing. He's kind of in that world with this script, right? Like network television. Yeah, this movie has a lot of cynicism in it, I'd say. But I think the actual... Well, maybe we should get into this. So Howard Beale, yes, he tells the audience that he's going to kill himself. He has become very myopic with his career, and due to low ratings. Mm-hmm. And him saying that he'll commit suicide, it gets him in trouble with his boss, or maybe not his boss, but the president of the network. And his actual boss is William Holden, who's a more or less supporter of his the whole movie.
Fantastic.
He is wonderful in this. He is so good. Maybe it's worth saying everybody in this movie is at like peak level of their careers.
Yeah.
Faye Dunaway, it's my favorite role of hers along with Chinatown, and my actual favorite actress from the whole era. And like I wish she had done more.
Yeah.
And so Howard Beale in fact gets a lot of high ratings, and there's a lot of demand, for him to be back on the air. So Faye Dunaway is a kind of network program lady.
Was there?
She sees it.
I think is because he made the threat.
He makes the threat.
And they decide to give him another farewell.
Right.
And there was some interest peaked at his threat.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and he makes a big unhinged from the heart commentary.
And that's where it really,
And one interesting fact I found was that a line was removed from his announcement that he was going to kill himself, where in the original script he referenced like that girl in Florida, because this was just 2 years after the first
that had actually
on-screen
happened.
Live suicide in
Yes.
America.
Yeah, that
Something
was a
that
topic,
really happened.
And it
was
has happened since several times too.
Yes, and I think it's a good thing it was cut from the script, because it's actually not important to the theme of the movie.
Right.
It would actually just draw a comparison to the real world too on the nose, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. It felt more important for this in-world to feel like the first time or a completely unprecedented
It needs
thing.
to have novelty. Yeah. And it would be too biopic-y of it to do that, I think.
Well, true, but then they also just completely satirize Patty Hearst's radicalization.
Yes.
Oh God.
And there's a kind of what's her name? Patricia Hill Collins type character with the communist lady.
Oh, that part was just this movie's a half century old, and how much of that feels modern.
It's hyper
That part
modern.
Especially felt very, very modern.
Including all the jargon of the different distinct ideologues or ideologies in the political spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And this actually is somewhat related to After Hours, in that when you have language that's impenetrable, you're just who are you talking to? Is it even a person on the other end of the table?
Yeah.
So and like obviously we know from sight and sound, but like what are we talking about? And and so there's this twisting of language that hardcore ideology does to you.
Yeah.
And then you get a truth teller to come along. So I view Howard Beale as a kind of Shakespearean fool, where he is the truth teller to the Emperor of No Clothes.
Got it.
And the funny part though is the Emperor of No Clothes in this movie is the audience. It's not any particular figure, because when he finally gets his own show and it becomes popular and successful, his big sermon to the audience is, we're in the state of the world that we're in now because you people don't read books. Mm-hmm. And I know it's on the nose, but it's wrapped up in, again, this kind of New York nervous dark humor that I just relish in.
I feel like it had to be on the nose too, because I think if you couched it in any sort of subtlety there, it would have been easier to miss.
Yes, and he is a prophet on television, and it should be on the nose.
Yeah, and it's also important that that's what makes the ratings dive, right? Like people they want to hear the stuff that like gets them excited, but the stuff that hits too close to home, they don't want to know.
Exactly, and this is the same thing. Like whenever I bring up economics with people, both left and right, when you like economics is a field that constantly gives you a reality check, which is why I think most people hate it. Mm-hmm. Because imagine your significant other, you come to them with a problem and you want to vent, and they continually try to offer up solutions for your predicament. Mm-hmm. It's annoying, at least oftentimes, right?
Right.
So many times you just want to say to the partner, I just want to be heard right now. I don't need to be told about, trade-offs this and cost that and solution here. So, a lot of what I say to people, especially when they're up in arms, it's not only rejected, but there's a lot of hostility toward it even. Mm-hmm. Like I've had a lot of people yell at me, and I'm mostly fine with it because
I've done it too.
Yes, you have.
I know.
To
I'm
me.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
What I love about Network, though, yes, it makes this. It's not even a prediction. I think it's always been with us with human nature, where you tell people you're why the world is the way it is, and people have limited bandwidth to accept that much responsibility. Like you try to sell someone a huge moral or ethical framework, and they're just like, that's way too much to commit to. And we'll get into that with silence, by the way. But I think that a lot of people, they're told, here's what you can do to make the world better. Mm-hmm. And they just hate the advice, right? Because it's like, I have my kids to take care of. I need to feed my household. My car needs to be repaired because of an oil leak. So
that's something that I really appreciate about the movie, in part because they seem to want real quote unquote TV, where like they actually, I think, partially want Howard to blow his brains out on air.
Yes.
But they also don't want it if it gets real for them, which is very, very true.
It's a very arm's length kind of realism that the audience craves.
Realism as entertainment, which is exactly why we've gotten as fucked up as we have.
Yes. And then, of course, there's the kind of viciousness of the network itself.
Yeah.
So Faye Dunaway is this almost anti-human character, right? Mm-hmm. She is her job. Mm-hmm. And kind of like the career woman, but taken to the nth degree. And it's unrealistic, but the point is, like, your job is like devouring you and others around you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and everybody in the movie can be seen functionally. Like, she is the meter by which the networks take the response from audiences and turn it back into new content. Yeah. She's not necessarily heartless. I mean, no offense, but she reminds me of what you just said about being practical and utilitarian. Yeah. When she sees that there's a cry for rage-filled programming and violence, right? She goes, "I will supply that, and our ratings will go up." It's not if the audience was crying out for puppies and kindness, she would supply as much puppies and kindness as she could do to boost her career. Right,
and I guess the my response to that is, and I agree with you, is I think there's markets in everything, but that doesn't mean we want that to be the case.
There's got to be a human element.
Selling negativity is clearly what people want. Yeah. But it does actually hurt them quite a bit, I think.
This is why I say watch Succession, because I think Succession is the other half of this question, where it's tackling it from what is the human cost of.
Well, I think we see it actually. Now,
we see it there, but we see it from the producer's point of view, really, I'd say.
We also get Arthur Jensen's, though, so he's kind of the owner of the network, played by the Ned Beatty character. Right. He's in the movie for like 2 minutes, and he's wonderful. No,
but he is...
The way that they write that part is really interesting to me. It bugged me the first time I watched it through, because I'm like, why is this so over-the-top dramatic? And then I realized exactly what he's doing. Right. Which is just kind of dialing into Howard Beale's like wavelength, really, there.
And it's actually very manipulative. Yeah, because extremely. He's willing, and this is a kind of public choice theory angle of the movie, and I've never heard anyone talk about it this way. Arthur Jensen is willing to allow Howard Beale to do his shtick. The people at the network are like flipping out, like the ratings are tanking, right?
He's telling the truth that our network is corrupt. Our
right.
network is...
And Arthur Jensen's like, keep doing it. And because he knows how transaction costs work. So he's like, let the show tank, because tanking equals audience dipping out. And there's a kind of commentary in this movie about what I call the great forgetting. Like, people often say that history is cyclical. I agree for the most part.
Yes, it is.
And, and not that it needs to be, but that it has been. And so, like, it's a phenomenological truth, but maybe not a necessary one. And
I don't know.
Well, we'll see. We'll get into this, but that'll be later. But with how the network goes, Arthur Jensen keys in on the fact that the audience, they will forget if you just allow the show to die. So they're not going to care about the corruption or the oil deal with the Saudis, which is like one of the big things. And he just understands media really well, in a way that the network programmers themselves don't. They're chasing ratings. Arthur Jensen, he's further out, and he's thinking about the further, like, how do you contain, something from the public? Oh, just make it not interesting.
Yep.
The moment we're referring back to is also references an earlier point in the movie where Howard Beale is at home and kind of has what seems to be a nervous breakdown, where he seems to hear a voice.
Yes, I hear you.
That's telling
God,
him that something like that, where he's supposed to go out and share his message, and he says, "Why me?" And the voice he thinks he hears says, "Because you're on TV, dummy."
Right.
Which is the same line that the owner of the whole network uses to manipulate him.
Yes.
Which makes me want to ask you, is Howard Beale crazy? Is he hearing voices because somehow that story has gotten Howard has somehow, I don't know if he does it in the script, say out loud that he heard a voice, and the voice,
right?
I think he does.
I think he does.
Yeah. So this is just the executive turning that back around on him, and it just happens to work cleanly and perfectly, almost like in a comic book. It's just a one-to-one. Yes, I tell you that I am the voice, and I repeat what the voice said, then you'll believe me and do what I tell you to do.
Right.
So is Howard Beale a prophet, enlightened,
losing his mind?
The sort of deserves the kudos we would give like Jon Stewart today, speaking truth to power, or is he just crazy?
I personally don't think he's crazy. He strikes me as a kind of Nietzschean figure, actually, where Nietzsche becomes obsessed with this question of where do we go from here with our ethical systems. Now, you need not buy the whole Nietzschean package. I don't. But I think he's extremely instructive as a social commentator. He's actually more of that than a philosopher, in my opinion. And so he lines up a lot with Howard Beale in that he is speaking truth to, I would say, mass culture. And they just reject it, right? And I think if we can call him crazy, I think it's him just like desperately actually trying to reach people. I think his attempts on the show are not showmanship. I think he's actually trying to reach people. Now we could call that crazy, but I think it's out of desperation, not out of some sort of mental illness.
That part is true, but then you get those scenes like when he's in bed alone.
Yes.
Like, that's not for anybody. It does seem like he really seems to hear a voice. So.
No, I agree. And even Faye Dunaway's like, maybe he really is, enlightened in some way.
Or nuts.
Yeah.
Quick, let's put it on camera and make a profit off of his
Pretty
enlightenment. Whatever it takes.
Yes.
I remember back during the early Obama years, people used to compare Glenn Beck to Howard Beale because he would have very similar on-screen breakdowns where he'd just get into like sobbing fits.
Right.
And be like, we're all going to die, the world is ending. And I think it wound up in a very similar way there too, where he just got memory hold. Nobody thinks about him anymore.
But Glenn Beck was a piece of shit.
Yeah. For sure, but I think there was also kind of like mentally he was not okay, and having him on there, it was tapping into the same kind of dark thing they're talking about in Network.
Yeah, I think that Howard, he's at a point in his life, I mean, they say it in the narration, which the narration of this movie, when it happens, is absolute beauty.
The absolute clinical tone of their narration, just reading off, like, here's the share that they got today.
I found that really jarring.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think that's what they were going for.
When it happened more than once, I understood its functionality.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But I think this movie would also work without any of it.
It would.
It would.
Yeah.
I think it's trying to, I mean, maybe over the top, arguably, but trying to drive that same point home of like, here we are, we're chasing after this very like mathematical equation despite the human cost, you know?
On that point, I can give Network 2 very sincere compliments. With that very clunky narration, that feels like a Kurt Vonnegut move.
It does.
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
it totally does.
And then with the Howard Beale show and like, oh, Susie, I'm gonna get the names wrong, Susie the Psychic, and blah blah blah. That felt like a big old Firesign Theater sketch. Like this movie feels like somebody took a Firesign Theater sketch and said, no, let's really do it sincerely.
It does.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's watch everything fall apart and everybody's cartoonish, like by the end Faye Dunaway's almost cartoonishly rabid about what she's doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like, we just gotta find a way to kill him. Like there's no
humanity there at all.
Right.
Utilitarian. It's like, what do we do next with Howard Beale?
Utilitarian without side constraints. Yes.
Yeah, utilitarian without
conscience.
Yeah. Which just I mean have either of you guys seen Bo Burnham's Inside?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
No.
That's a bummer because the further I got into it, the more I'm like, Bo Burnham's Inside feels like a 45-year later answer to like the audience side of what Network is doing.
Is that the special that ends with him talking about going to Chipotle?
No.
Oh, okay.
This he made it during the pandemic and he slowly goes insane, but he also has a lot of songs about media consumption where he essentially accepts that it can be wonderful and terrible for you at the same time. And it'll probably drive you crazy, but what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
So,
and something I appreciate about this movie, now, this is one of the things I've been yelled at before, which is I'm more likely to blame voters than any particular figure that's running for election.
I mean,
Likewise, I'd rather blame moviegoers than the producers also. Because like take for example, like however you might think about it, the new Star Wars movies, people love them, people hate them, and what I think about it's not really even materially important, but what matters is just how incredibly heated and fired up people get about it. And it's like, listen, if you don't like this, why are you going to see them still? Like you're saying one thing, but talk is cheap compared to like, you know, you actually paying your ticket price.
Yeah.
So like, just give up like I did. Like, and I don't really think the prequels are any better anyway. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, the prequels are better given the new movies. I'm like, yeah, they were never that good to begin with either.
Wait, that argument just ties right back into Network, honestly. Of like, wait, let the prequels tank, let everyone get mad about Jar Jar Binks, give us 10 years,
right?
Then we're gonna make some new movies, and whether people like them or not, that opinion will reflect upon the previous stuff. And if people don't like the newest one, then the previous ones will suddenly seem a little bit shinier.
That's the worst thing about it is how accurate it is.
Yes, and you know, people. No, what I like about Network is it is a little harsh on the audience, but it's funny the whole time it does it. So it's kind of like a good Kubrick movie where it's deep and it has these layers, but it's also entertaining. Hitchcock's that way too in his best moments, where it's not pure art house. There's actually a lot of like what a wide audience would like about this movie. But you know, we have to say, would these shows do well if there wasn't an audience demand? I say no way. You know, so people, and I think we're biologically programmed to kind of be negative, actually.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Right? We need to notice the tiger in the grass and not the pretty sun in the sky.
There was that Sony leak from 10 odd years ago where the Sony executive emails got hacked.
Right.
And like a third of it was just, God, I wish we didn't have to make more fucking Adam Sandler movies. Because like they hate them, but also they make a ton of money.
Yes,
so
they do.
Yeah, that's a lot of the entertainment industry in a nutshell. If you want to stay alive,
blow up your TV, throw away your paper, go to the country, build you a home, plant a little garden.
But Patty Chayefsky actually has solutions for the people in the audience They just don't like it. And
oh, this is network. I'm
So
sorry.
we're already into it.
I'm sorry.
you're looking for a segue, baby. Here we go.
We've already segued.
The segue is you're already there.
That's right.